right? So
Mm.
if you want those kind of jobs, you have to be visible because I mean they don't know you. So I put
Mm.
so much effort in being visible. Post about what you're learning, post about what you're doing. This way, this is how you can get the attention of people. Then you can start applying for internships and all of that.
Welcome back to another episode of the UX Minds podcast. I'm absolutely delighted today to have on Goodness Adebayo, a UX designer and mentor making waves in the UX community, especially over in Nigeria. Now, she's the founder of MWG, or Mentoring with Goodness, as the name suggests, a mentoring program. And she's helped over 150 designers enter the field. So she's not just teaching design, but she's helping build confidence and create opportunities over there. So this is a really insightful episode. It gives also me some insights into the UX landscape over in Nigeria, which is something I wasn't really familiar with. Obviously, I know a lot about the Italian market. So it's going to be good for you listeners that are based out of Africa, and in particular West Africa. If you're looking at entering the field as UX designer or even a researcher, this can really give you the insights on how to enter the field successfully and follow in Goodness Adebayo's steps. So really excited for this one. So let's get into today's interview. Okay, great. So maybe Goodness, could you give us a bit more of an introduction about who you are, where you're from, etc., just so our listeners know who they're listening to?
My name is Goodness. I'm a UX designer from Nigeria. I have had 3 years of experience working in the field. And my story into UX design. So, like I always tell people, I did not have I didn't come into UX with like, oh, I want to become a UX designer.
Mm.
So I transitioned from being a baker to a UX designer.
Ah,
I just wanted to learn graphics for my baking business. And
okay.
then Adobe Photoshop was seeming quite hard. Then
Mm.
I started using Figma, and literally that was how I got into UX design.
Ah, wow, that's incredible. You're the first ex-baker I think that I've had on the podcast, so
Yeah,
that's the first. So you mentioned there that you were doing graphics, etc., for your baking company.
baking business. Yeah.
What was it about, I don't know, design, or obviously you said you started learning some tools like Figma. What was it about design and eventually UX that appealed to you?
Okay, so like I said, Adobe Photoshop was seeming quite hard for me. So my
Mm,
friend was like, "Oh, come use Figma. It's like really easy, beginner friendly, and all."
mm,
So he's like a senior UX designer, so he doesn't like
okay,
have time to teach me all the time. So most
okay.
times I would go to check YouTube, but because Figma is a tool that is used for UX design, I would see tutorials on UX design, and that was how I started practicing. So
Mm.
I started UX with UI, right? I started
Hmm.
designing UI first. I
Yeah.
didn't even understand what I was designing. I was just designing for the fun of it.
Yeah.
And then when my friends saw the design, they're like, "Oh, you're really good," and all of that. And they're like, "Okay, start taking courses and all." It was when I
Mm.
started taking UX courses, I'm like, "Whoa, like this is like way beyond just UI,
Yes.
meaning of colors, even the text you're using, it has
Yeah.
meaning, your grid, your styles, and all of that." I'm like, wow, like this is really vast and big. And that was how like I started learning the background and the basics
Okay.
of UX, then became a UX designer.
Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome. I think that generally is, from what I've seen anyway, and also my own personal experience, that you initially are appealed to, let's say, the UI and learning UI, graphics, etc. And then you discover UX. And as you mentioned, there's a lot more behind design, etc. Like you said, around the understanding why certain colors are used, and obviously the research
Mhm.
behind that goes into all of that to come up with
Yeah.
the final
Mhm.
design. So that's really cool. And you touched on, let's say, how you learned to UX. So could you go a bit deeper into that for our listeners? Because a lot of our listeners are transitioning career or are coming from different backgrounds. So it'd just be interesting. You briefly mentioned it, but I'd like to delve a bit
Yeah.
deeper into that. So
Okay.
how
So
did that go
I
about?
okay, yeah. So I took this course, Zuri UX design course.
Okay.
Right. So I took the course while I was still in school. So I didn't like really do it so well. But
Mm-hmm.
like once I was done with school, I got back into it again. So I did more of self-learning.
Okay.
right? Because like I mentioned, most of my friends are like senior UX designers and all. So, I
Mm,
would be around them. I
sure.
learned mostly by watching and, watching them design,
Mm.
watching them, attend client meetings and, having to explain their design decisions and all of them. Like, oh, really? You have to explain this. And then from I also took Google UX design course. I always recommend that for anybody that wants to get into UX design. Google UX course is very good,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And then I got a scholarship with Geneva School of Design
Hmm.
for a UI course as well. So these are like the few courses that I took getting into UX design.
Mm. That's really interesting. You got me with my coffee then. That's really interesting. So you learned obviously via this course, and I imagine also these senior UX designers helped you. So to go from, let's say, studying and learning about UX, what was the transition like from doing that and maybe putting it into practice? So you mentioned you got a scholarship. Was that with a company, or how did that go about? Did you have to freelance or did you volunteer? How was that transition for you?
Okay, so the scholarship was to learn UX design,
Okay.
right? So I just applied for it and I was able to learn UX design. Then from there, I started building my portfolio, just putting in
Okay.
design.
Mm.
And I started working on personal case studies as well,
Okay.
right? So just like I see a problem around me that I feel like, okay, can
Okay.
be solved through UX design and all. I redesigned website as well, put it in my
Mm.
portfolio. So like I always tell people, you don't have to work with a company to have like a case study. You
Yeah.
can like just see a problem around you, build a case
Mm.
study based off of
Mm.
that. And that was what was in my portfolio. And
Yeah.
I got my first internship through that, just
Okay.
having my own personal case studies in my
Nice.
portfolio. I got my first internship through that. And from there, I started getting contract jobs online. Yeah, that's why I
Okay.
always speak of, being visible as well,
Yeah.
posting your work online and all. So yeah, I started posting my work online. I started getting contract jobs from there. And yeah, that was how the transition was.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, that's really good, and it helps for people who are, because I was in that position one time too. Well, I think most people are, where you don't have that experience of working for a real company or working on a real project that you can share on your portfolio. So it's always kind of hard. How do I display what I know and what I can do? And this is one
Mhm.
of the routes. I use the volunteering route, so I volunteered, and that allowed me to have some case studies.
Okay.
Or there's the route that you took where you can, let's say, self-make case studies based on things you see around you. I think that's the key as well, because I've seen some people create these case studies, but maybe on the, let's say, the more common products like Spotify or redesigning Netflix and things like that.
Yeah.
What was your, like, what are your views on that? And you touched on by looking at problems around you. So how was that
Mhm.
process for you? What sort of things did you look for, and how did you develop those case studies?
Okay, so I think the first case study that I had on my portfolio, it's no longer there because
Yeah,
now
don't
I just
worry.
don't feel like it's
I won't go
worthy to
and
be there.
check.
Yeah, the first one was I developed a case study. Like I mentioned, I was a baker and before
Mm,
transitioning into UX
okay.
design. So my first case study was a project to help people plan their meals,
Nice.
right? To help people plan their meals and get the food delivered to them and all of that. Because I kind of feel it's a problem because I mean sometimes you're in the house, you literally forget that you've not eaten all day,
Okay.
right? But if you have an app that
Yeah.
plans your meal and you've done like the subscription and they just deliver it to you, it would like really make sense. And that was like my first case study. And then
Mm,
after that, I also developed a case study for like an health platform. So
okay.
in Nigeria here, unlike, the Asian countries and European countries that, they have 911 in case of emergencies and all of that,
Mm,
we really don't have that here. And I
right.
remember there was a day, one of our neighbors just, ran to our house and, they were asking for my dad to use his car to take someone in their house to the hospital. And I'm
Mm,
like, this is really bad because I mean, there is literally no number you can call. What if this happened in the middle of the night or something like
mm,
that? So I developed a case study based on that. It's 360 healthcare. I think it's still in
okay.
my portfolio up till now.
Okay.
Just a platform where you works like Uber. but like for to other ambulance and all of that, right? Just in
Okay.
case of emergencies and all. So these are like problems around me, that I feel like okay,
Mm,
could be solved. I developed a case study based on that and I put it in my portfolio. So like I always tell people, look around you, there's a problem that you can
yeah.
solve. You can work on it, put it in your portfolio, and it's your work.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I think that's a really good thing that you did as well. You found a real problem that you had experienced probably yourself, and it was connected to your previous career in baking. So it was a real problem
Mhm.
you could work, and it was something that would be demonstrated in your case study, that it is a real problem that you're solving. Because I think sometimes we can fall into the trap of not really solving a problem, just okay, everybody
Mhm.
knows Spotify or Netflix, so let me redesign it, that's not really demonstrating what you can do as a UX designer, and also it doesn't really, from my point of view, demonstrate that you know what UX is, that it becomes more of a beautifying UI case study, which is okay if that's what you want to do. But if you want to get into UX, I think it's important that you demonstrate that you can solve real problems and
Real
identify
problem.
them. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. And so that was obviously early on in your career. What are you doing now? And what was that journey like for you?
Okay, what am I doing now? Like I said, I get to work on freelance projects most of the
Okay.
time because I preach visibility a lot. And
Hmm.
different being from like Nigeria and like Western Africa, and if you're looking for a remote job, you have to be visible because
Mm.
UX design is not as what's the word now? We don't have so much openings for UX
Okay.
designers
Yeah.
unlike other countries outside of here, right? So
Mm.
if you want those kind of jobs, you have to be visible because I mean they don't know you. So I put
Mm.
so much effort in being visible, putting out my designs to get clients and all of that. So majorly I work freelance, I work with,
Okay.
clients on projects and all, and that's what I've been doing mostly.
Ah, that's cool. That's cool. And is that working for clients within Nigeria, or do you work also with clients abroad?
Oh, so most of my clients have been from the UK, from the
Ah,
US, and all of that. Yeah.
oh, that's cool. That's cool. Have you noticed maybe a difference? So working with maybe clients in Nigeria, working with clients in the UK or US, do you notice any difference? Maybe also with the understanding of UX, maybe when you're explaining what you can offer, what you can do, maybe also demonstrating the work at the end of the project. Do you notice any difference?
Yes, definitely. I would say that, for clients around here, most of them are more focused on what they want and what they
Mm,
think users want, and
okay.
they don't really see the importance of UX,
Okay.
research, usability testing, and all of that. So when you're preaching these things to them, they're like, no, this is what we think, this is what you should do, and all of that. But
Mm,
I think like outside of here, like in European countries and all of that, they see more value in user research, user
mm,
testing and all. I worked on a project, I think early last year. And I would say that that's like one of the projects that I was really proud of because we took so much time working on the research. We interviewed people. We brought people on board to test this product before launching it and all of that.
mm,
And it was a really great experience because I mean, these are things that we need to do to be able to validate designs. These designs are not good because they look good if it
mm.
doesn't work for users. And
Yeah.
these are some of the things that, you have to preach over and over again to like people in the Western world. And yeah, so I think that's the major difference between, working with clients that are outside
Mm.
of here and people here. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. Actually, we can maybe go a bit deeper into that topic. So, as you've mentioned, I mentioned you're from Nigeria. You're based in Nigeria. How
Yeah.
do you view the current UX landscape in Nigeria? Maybe also from when you entered and started learning UX and entering the field, even to now, maybe the comparison. Are you seeing any growth? What is the UX field like there?
Definitely there has been growth, right? So companies like fintech companies, health companies, and all are starting
Mm.
to see the importance of like UX design and are
Okay.
starting to hire more UX designers and all of that. A
Okay.
space that I feel like we have not really explored a lot is like the Web3 space,
Mm.
gaming, crypto, and all of that.
Okay.
We don't really have so much of those kind of companies here,
Mm.
right? So if you're into all of those kind of things, you want to like target companies outside of here because we don't really have companies like that that are, really functional or
Mm.
like in big scale, right?
Mm.
So yeah, but there
Okay.
has been great experience here.
Okay, okay. And in terms of opportunity to learn UX, like I think that's anyway a worldwide problem on the one hand, that
Mhm.
it's a discipline, but it's sometimes misdefined and it's not got its own, let's say, uh, place that you can go and say, oh, yeah, I'm going to go and learn UX. It's starting around the world. I've noticed there are more and more courses, even at universities, but usually you have to study an adjacent field, psychology or art or just design in general, and then move into UX that way. In Nigeria, is that the way that people enter UX now, or are they doing the route that you took, so self-learning coming from another career? What is the journey like generally for people in Nigeria?
Okay, yeah, so I think a lot of people still do self-learning
Mm.
and online courses, right?
Mm.
One company that I think is really doing great in Nigeria right now is Alt School.
Okay.
When it comes to tech learning and all of that. So I think that's one company that is really doing great
Okay.
in teaching people UX design and software design in
Mm.
general, data analysis and all of that.
Mm.
But aside that, personally, I don't know. I think a lot of
Okay.
people still do a lot of self-learning and take
Okay.
online courses.
Okay. Okay. And you mentioned it before as well, that the jobs that there are there, how are those jobs positioned? Because it happens also here in Italy that I work in UX research, and the UX research field here in Italy is still, I would say, in its immaturity. It's growing, and there are becoming more specific UX research roles, or maybe roles that are research roles but are defined under a different title. So, how is that in Nigeria? Are there UX design roles? You mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, but are you noticing maybe roles that are UX design roles, but they are maybe titled UI UX, or how does that look?
Okay, so I don't think presently we have like specific roles
Okay.
here. So if you're a UX designer, you're carrying the hat of like a UI designer, UX researcher, branding. You also do the branding in most
Right.
cases, and even sometimes the
Everything.
logo, right? So yeah, you like literally do everything aside graphic design,
Okay.
right? Some company would still expect you to like do graphic design, and I don't even think this is a Nigerian thing or a Western thing. I feel like even some companies outside of here still do it.
Of
I
course, yeah.
think it's more of like a world problem rather
Yeah.
than a Western problem, but I think it's still more on this side than generally, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think yeah, it depends on the country. Like I said, also here in Italy, you get some companies that will put UX UI and they expect you to do everything, like the design of the interface, also apply some UX like fundamentals and processes and do the research, or if they want you to do the research. Like there is still a lot of confusion in many countries. I think countries like the UK, US are probably a bit more advanced, so there's more companies that understand how UX works. So it's interesting to see these differences in country to country. And have you, I don't know, do you know how maybe other countries in West Africa, close to Nigeria, I don't know, Ghana, countries like that. Do you know anything about the landscape there? Is it very similar to Nigeria from what you know, or how does that look?
Yeah, so I think it's still very similar to Nigeria. I
Okay.
think it's still very similar to Nigeria. I think like a lot of people try to get like job roles outside of the Western countries because of the high pay,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Because the pay outside in UK, US and all is, way more than
Mm.
pay here. So they try to get remote jobs and
Yeah,
all of
yeah,
that.
yeah. No, I can imagine. Here too, the wages in Italy are one of the lowest in Europe. So, yeah, I fully
Yeah.
understand. So that's been really cool to understand a bit more because it's a country I know people from Nigeria, but it's a country that, in terms of UX, I knew little about. So hopefully, also for our listeners, it's been nice to hear that. So if you are a listener or a watcher, and you're from Nigeria and you're thinking about entering UX, what would you say, Goodness? What advice would you give them if they're thinking, yeah, I like UX, I see it on YouTube and I see it on LinkedIn, people talking about it, something that appeals to me. What would you say is the best way to enter the field from your point of view?
Okay, so I would say first, try to do some self-learning,
Okay.
right? Go on YouTube, try to understand the nitty-gritty of the field,
Mm,
right? Once you're sure that this is what I want to do, then you can
mm,
start taking paid courses,
yeah.
right? Go to a UX school or where you can like learn it fully in a
Mm,
structured way. Because I mean, there is a lot of buzz around tech and all of that, and a lot of people just want to jump into it.
yeah.
But I always advise do some self-learning first. Be
Yeah.
sure that okay, I think I can do this or I want to do
Mm,
this before investing in it. Once you're
yeah.
sure you can invest in it, go to a school, take a course online. Like I mentioned, alt school, and alt school is not only in Nigeria. I think
Mm,
it's for the Western West Africa.
yeah.
I'm not sure, but yeah, you can check it. You can check it up.
Okay.
We also have like Geniza School of Design as well. So there are like places that you can learn UX design in a structured way. Once
Mm,
you're done with that, like I always preach, if you're here, you need to be very visible online. Like you
yeah.
don't have a choice than to be visible. Post about what you're learning, post about what you're doing this way. This is how you can get the attention of people. Then you can start
Mm,
applying for internships and all of that. And yeah, you go from there.
yeah. No, that's really good advice. That's really good advice. And yeah, I think it's something you need to do. You need to be visible. You need to share what you're learning. You need to have a presence on LinkedIn. That's a big part now of not even on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is obviously the main place that you can do where you can go, but like Behance, if you're more visual and you want to focus more on the visual side, or yeah, there's other websites as well where you can share your work. But that's a big thing, especially if you want to get remote work because it's a way that
Yeah.
you can connect with people outside. But I thought it was really good advice that you mentioned about first do self-learning, because I think sometimes people might jump into courses,
Yeah.
they have an appeal about UX. Oh yeah, that sounds looks really cool. And as you said, everyone wants to jump into tech because they think that's where the money is, etc. So you jump into a UX course, and then you realize later it's not really for you,
Yeah.
or and
Mhm.
then maybe you've invested a lot of time, energy, maybe even money. So that's really good. It's what I did as well. I self-taught. I self-taught most, I would say, of my journey. And then obviously I had mentors, as you did as well. Um,
Mhm.
and then I did a few online courses, but like courses I could afford and wasn't maybe, let's say, as in big of an investment where maybe if I didn't like it or I didn't take it up at the end, that it wasn't, I hadn't lost it too much. And I think that's something that's always good to remember that, yeah, if you want to learn it, learn it. And as you say, do some self-learning, pay for some courses, but be wary about investing too much money and too much of your time with the risk that maybe one day, I don't know, because the job market is changing as well. It's not
Yeah.
easy. And I do know many that have tried to enter the field and have been looking for a job for years and have never found that break. Not that they're not good, but just they've not been able to
Mhm.
enter and find their first job, which can be for various reasons, your location or just timing. There can be many different factors. So yeah, I think that's really good because there are also many courses and maybe boot camps out there that are very expensive. And there's no
Mhm.
guarantee that at the end you'll get a job, even if they advertise it in that way. So
Yeah.
I think
Mhm.
that's really good. So thanks for being honest with that and sharing that advice. So yeah, cool. It's been really nice to meet you, Goodness, and also just learn about you, your background, what you do. and also more importantly about the landscape in Nigeria. And I hope for our listeners, maybe also our listeners from Africa, it has been also quite informative for them. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. And maybe it'd be good if you could share some of the schools that you mentioned. If you can tell me them
Mhm.
afterwards, and then I can leave them in the
Okay.
comments and in the description so I can share that with the listeners.
Okay, yeah, definitely.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.